Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome back to Rick's Megazord Madness, presented by the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, and today we're going to be going over the north side of our bracket. So for those of you following along at home, on the pentagon, that is the top right quarter that I've designated as north, and we will be going from top to bottom. And again, to reiterate, since it's been a while since the last episode, I am not keeping up with what's going on the real Megazord Madness. You guys can go ahead and follow that yourself, and all my picks are based on without any interference from the actual votes going on with Megazord Madness. With all that said, let's get into the matches. Our first match is Ninja Storm's Mammoth Carrier Zord versus Zeo's Pyramidas Carrier Zord. Now, starting with the Mammoth, the thing is, I really don't know much about this Zord, because it's not really well explained within the canon of the series. I never owned the toy, and usually when I think about Ninja Storm, I don't think of this Zord by itself. I typically associate it with its Ultra Zord form. I think about it when it does combine with the other Zords, but I don't think about it by itself and in of itself. Now, it is basically a giant mammoth with tusks, and I believe it can go ahead and shoot the balls out, or power spheres, as an attack. That's pretty much it from what I can go ahead and think of. I purposely did not go and look up anything about the Mammoth Carrier Zord in this, simply because I wanted to see what I could do in remembering from memory, what was it about the Zord that I could go ahead and remember. And I think part of my criteria is it a memorable Zord? It's got to be cool, but it's got to be memorable. It's got to have some fond memories in your head. And the Mammoth Zord is one of those that, again, I really have no memory of when I think back to Ninja Storm. Now, as a whole, I didn't really like Ninja Storm, so that may account to it. But when we take a look at Zeo's Pyramidas, a series that I loved, Pyramidas sticks out a whole lot more than it does for the Mammoth Zord. And again, that can be attributed to, nostalgia, again, it being played up more in the series. Of course, it's been given more to do in the series than I believe in O-Ranger. And the simple fact that I own the toy of it, and that is one of the best toys I believe Bandai has ever come out with as far as, toys in that era. So when I look at, Pyramidas does have more nostalgic and more positive memories, and the thing is, I can remember everything about it. I know how it transforms, how it can go from the two different types of carry modes, which is something we don't actually see as the two different types of Ultra Zords, technically three if you want to get into it, because not only does it house the Zeo Zords inside of it, it houses the Zeo Zords on top of it, and it houses the Super Zeozords within it. So you basically have three Ultra Zords in one, or three different combinations with the same type or different type of Zords. Not to mention, it has attacks on its own. It can shoot lasers, it can shoot lightning, and something that was actually added for Power Rangers, which again, I don't believe was an O-Ranger because of the nature of its origin, is that Pyramidas can fly through space. It can actually travel between Earth and Triforia, and Aquitar has faster than light travel. It's just awesome. I mean, there's a lot of cool things about it. It's a giant pyramid, it has a robot form, it has an Ultra Zord form, and it travels through space. So, the thing is, I don't remember much about the Mammoth Zord. I remember a lot about Pyramidas, some of the cool things it has. So, whether you want to notch just up to nostalgia or not, it's just that I have a better memory about Pyramidas because it did more. It was more relevant in the story and the plots, and it's honestly just a lot more interesting. So, in this round, I'm going to go ahead and pick Pyramidas. In the second matchup, we have Mighty Morphin Titanus versus the Dino Thunder Mezzodon Megazord, or Mezzodon Rover. And this is another matchup where I have better memories of the one than the other. Now, as far as Titanus, of course, it's Mighty Morphin. They populate this list like rabbits. I remember the Mighty Morphin Zords finally. I remember Titanus finally. I'm having trouble getting a hold of the Legacy Titanus Megazord, which is crazy. But the point is, I remember a lot of things about it. And the thing is about Titanus that the other Zords did not get, and this is something we rarely get with Zords nowadays, and really, I even think past the Gung Ho episode, is that the introduction of Titanus is as an antagonist and is essential to the plot of what's happening. Because they got to go find these new weapons to stop the Super Punnies, and who's guarding it but Titanus, and part of the challenge is to get past Titanus to be worthy of gaining the weapons. So I like how Titanus actually fit into the plot of that episode, that it just wasn't another Zord they just churned out, or they made it, or they found it, or whatever. They had to become worthy. me. Now, granted, a little bit of that was taken out of context from the Zoo Ranger episode, but I think for the time, and again, the first season trying to get its footing, a little bit of leeway on those points. Nevertheless, the fact that we were able to, get Titanus in that fashion, the way he was introduced, it was just awesome. Not to mention, does anybody remember forget that scene where in Doomsday, Rita basically pulls Titanus down into the earth, and the Megazord's trying to pull it up by the neck to save it. That's awesome imagery, and that's the kind of stuff that stays with you, which makes you want to go ahead and pick things like Titanus over something like the Mezzodon, which again, it's not that I forgot that it existed in Dino Thunder. I just don't know anything about it. Again, I own the toy of this one, and it's interesting. It's definitely a carrier Zord because you put the other four auxiliary Zords inside. It's not really like it's armor for them. It's inside of it. But that's a conversation for another time. But I don't remember how they acquired this Zord. I don't remember what the significance was. It was just another Zord that popped up, which shows you, in my opinion, Titanus, integral to the plot, and everybody remembers how it was introduced. I mean, everybody knows what episode Titanus was in Gung Ho because of what was going on. It's a very classic episode. What episode was the Mezzodon Megazord in? I personally can't remember, and again, I did not look this information up before I started because what could I remember about the Mezzodon from memory? As a devoted Power Ranger fan since I was, 6 years old, what is it about Titanus and Mezzodon and all these other Zords that actually stick out from memory? Because, I think Tolkien said that a myth is a story that you remember, but you don't remember any particular version of that being told. Like, we all know Red Riding Hood. That is in context a myth, but nobody can point out what was the first version they ever heard or that they are familiar with. And even when you tell the version, what version are you telling exactly? Is it an amalgam of everything you've heard before? Is it your own version? The same thing I think can be applied to the Power Ranger episodes is that in the mythology of the Power Rangers, or the mythos of the series, you remember certain things. You remember Tommy and Jason scaling the mountainside to get the weapons, to get past Titanus, and Tommy giving Jason his shield. You remember that stuff. But you don't really remember the Mezzodon Megazord, how that first appeared and what they had to go through. I think Tommy and Trent had to go to a waterfall to get the Jurassic shield, and that's really all I can go ahead and remember. I'm probably a horrible fan for saying that, guys, but again, it's got to be in your memory, and it's not really in my memory. And again, Dino Thunder was probably another season I did not particularly like, so it's not going to go ahead and stick in my memory as well. And I think that has a lot to do with it as well. I'm sure those of you who are diehard Dino Thunder fans will say, "Oh, it's this episode. This is exactly what happened." Blah 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 blah, and great, that you remember and you like it that way. But I think in the context of the entire Power Rangers series within the Power Rangers mythos, Titanus is more significant in its introduction and execution than, say, the Mezzodon Zord, which, I don't even know if it was destroyed at the end. There's a lot of questions about what happened at the end of Dino Thunder anyway. But to make a long story short, I'm going to pick Titanus over again. The positive memories I have, the fact that I can actually remember it and tell you everything about Titanus, that's the kind of stuff that I like, and that's one of the reasons, or those are the reasons I'm picking Titanus over Mezzodon. All right, next we have Mystic Force's Phoenix Zord versus In Space's Mega Winger. Now, here's the thing about it. I know a lot of people don't like Mystic Force, and I'm kind of iffy on it. Frankly, I think Mystic Force was much better than what they had been doing before. And again, I like Operation Overdrive, and I thought the span of those 2 years were pretty good in comparison to what came before. But I know a lot of people don't have that memory. But when I think about the Phoenix Zord, it's not so much, again, the positive memories I have. This is a case where it is something about what it can do and what makes it unique and special. What is it about the Phoenix Zord that does stand out from a lot of people from the other Zords on this list, or any Zords in the history of Power Rangers? This is a Zord where Nick can physically transform by the use of magic into a Zord. Now, we've had that a couple of times, I think, before and since, but never played up to the scale that we have it here. and I love it. This is something that should be implemented more often. I mean, obviously, in Kaku Ranger, it's hinted that that's kind of what was happening in Alien Rangers, but not really. And again, this is where we full on went into. I mean, fleet of Zords where they are actually the Rangers transformed into giant living machines. Now, to get all the specifics and technical aspects about that, that's rather daunting, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but again, it's magic, and well, that's the excuse everybody uses. But I love the fact that Nick can transform into this giant Zord, have his own sword, and can combine with the others to basically ride a dragon, be inside, be part of the Megazord, and combine with both Catastros and Brightstar to form a new combination. As I've said before with like Brightstar, I love the idea that you got the Centaur form, you got the robot form, you got the mount that can go ahead and ride it. I mean, frankly, really that combination should have been combined, the Phoenix and Brightstar on this list, as I would say with Catastros and Korag, although he doesn't technically turn into a Zord, he just turns into a giant version of himself. Nevertheless, I just think looking at the Phoenix, there's so many good things about it where, yeah, you may not remember the details, but it is so good as opposed to, say, something like the Mezzodon Megazord, which it's okay when it's own right, but the concept behind what the Phoenix is, what it stands for, being a person that turns into a Zord, I think is a lot more interesting than a sentient Zord. But again, that's a different conversation. Now, as far as the Mega Winger, yes, I actually do have a lot of positive memories about that. In Space had the least amount of Zords really up to that point, and it really worked in their favor. You had less Zords, so you actually got to focus on what was going on with the Rangers. And in that case, a new Zord was always important some way. I mean, look what we got. We got the introduction of the Astro Megazord within the second episode to save them from Astronema. It's the first time that they used it and worked together as a team. You got the Delta Megazord, which is a gift from the Phantom Ranger and another link in the chain of finding Zordon. Then you got the Mega Voyager, which was part of the cliffhanger. In order to defeat Darkonda, who's got this bizarre mutated form now, you had to go find these Zords with Zordon hidden on the moon of Gammon. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's a real moon. And they had to outrun Astronema to get them. And then the Mega Winger is something built by the Rebels, which Zane uses to help push away the asteroid from Earth in Dark Spectre's Revenge. So you see the significant difference between other series and Power Rangers in Space. I would say Power Rangers in Space was one of the series, if not the best series, to incorporate the Zords into the plot perfectly, where it doesn't seem like a new Zord is just popping out of nowhere for no reason, like Mega Force, Super Mega Force, and frankly, a lot of the newer seasons, I would say probably after Wild Force. But even Wild Force is guilty of that too. So while I will concede that I have a lot of positive feelings about the Mega Winger, but when I compare the two and I look at what each has to go ahead and offer, I do think that the Phoenix Zord is a lot cooler for what it is. Again, story points are great, and I know it's going to say counterintuitive to what I said about Titanus and the Mezzodon Megazord, but I really think the Phoenix is a lot better here. I really just can't justify it in the same way that I do Titanus and Mezzodon. I'm justifying the Phoenix here because of the capabilities of what it can go ahead and do with the other Zords and the fact that it's Nick. I mean, just really quick before we get on to the next one here. The Mega Winger, Titanus, the Mezzodon, the Mammoth Rover, Pyramias, and every other Zord on the list for the most part can be controlled by other people. But the Phoenix can't be controlled by anyone. It is Nick. It is himself. Nowhere can you have the Phoenix Zord and Nick in the same room at the same time. That's impossible. It's like having Bruce Banner and Hulk in the same room at the same time because they are one and the same. And there is something about that uniqueness that I want to go ahead and praise. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Phoenix Zord over the Mega Winger. It's just that simple, guys. I'm going to go ahead and pick the Phoenix in this round. Next, we have the Warrior Wheel and the Mystic Dragon from Super Megaforce. All right, let's talk about the Warrior Wheel. First of all, the Warrior Wheel is something that I always thought should have been in Turbo. And believe it or not, a lot of people who are not really into Power Rangers actually thought the Warrior Wheel was from Power Rangers Turbo. Because Turbo is all about cars and everything, and why not a giant wheel as a Zord? But no, it was part of, O-Ranger and Power Rangers Zeo. And again, this is another Zord that had great introduction where we thought it was an asteroid, but no, it was a Zord that was coming to go ahead and help us. And I love that the finishing attack is you put into the ball, you bowl it down, and it jumps into the bad guy and blows it up. I mean, that's freaking awesome, man. That's one of the best finishers, I think, in the history of Power Rangers, is the Warrior Wheel, again, exploding upon impact. But it's not as memorable as probably some of the other Zords from Zeo, but it's still cool within its own right. But when you compare that to the Super Mega Force Mystic Dragon, okay, here's the thing. I'm really confused on what the Mystic Dragon is in Mystic Force. As we've already stated, those Zords are the actual Rangers turned into Zords. But when our four other Rangers turn to this dragon, what is it? Did they create a new being that is the dragon? Is the dragon some sort of virile creature that's taken a hold of their personalities? Are they inside a chess piece cockpit? Is it a collective consciousness, again, like the Borg? We don't know, and that's never really explained. But what also is not explained is the existence of the Super Mega Force Mystic Dragon. This is something I really hate about the Super Mega Forzords, and why I'm really hesitant to choose any of them other than the Skyship that I did in the previous video. It's because we don't know exactly what they are, where they came from. I mean, because this is obviously not the same Zord that is made up of Xander, Vid, Madison, and Chip. This is not the same Zord by any stretch of the imagination. So what is it? Is it a construct created by the Ranger Keys? Is it a Zord that Gosei built? It's in the magic iPad that Noah has, so it must have existed, or he at least has knowledge of the future. I don't know what this is. That's the thing, and I can't justify picking it if I don't know what it is, and if the series doesn't bother to tell me what it is, then why should I give a damn? I mean, seriously, why should I give a damn about the Mystic Dragon if you don't bother to explain what it is? Gokaiger is guilty of the same thing, at least in that series. At least with Gokaiger, they make an attempt about the greater power and that they can unlock it. But in Super Mega Force, again, all that is stripped is just a dragon that may or may not be the original Zord from Mystic Force, and we're going to go ahead and use it now. Again, it's infuriating, and based on that, I can't choose the Mystic Dragon. I'm going to go with the Warrior Wheel. It's kind of a weaker matchup, to be honest, because, I mean, you got a decent Zord versus a Zord that's frankly crappy. I mean, yes, a dragon is awesome, but everything else that I just stated, Warrior Will wins in this round. Okay, our next matchup is the Mighty Morphin White Alien Shogun Zord. We'll get into that in a second. And the Megaforce Gosei Jet. Now, first of all, I am actually very surprised that Megazord Madness remembered to mention, because you'll see in the little card is they got the pilots on there, that they actually remembered that the White Shogun Zord was piloted by both Tommy and Catherine and Kimberly, that they were both in the cockpit at the same time. The White and Pink Rangers were. But then they had to label it the Alien Shogun Zord, where, yes, it was used by Delphine in the Alien Ranger saga, but it doesn't belong to the Alien Rangers. I even saw somebody, I think it was on Ranger Board, that thought, or I don't know where this comment was, but somebody was like, well, I always thought that the Rangers gave the Shogun Zords to the Alien Rangers, and that's why they don't have them in Zeo, which is completely inaccurate, but I can see where the confusion would happen, especially if, Mighty Morphin points out, hey, we're using them in Alien Rangers too, and of course they look just like the Alien Rangers because it's borrowed from Kaku Ranger footage. So they did little yet no research on that, which I don't know how that's possible, but there you go. That's what it is. As in the Zord by itself, again, I think a lot of the coolness factor was stripped from what its original origin was in Kaku Ranger, as stated before. Like in Mystic Force, the Kaku Ranger would actually become the Shogun Zords. That's not exactly what's happening in Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers. It's certainly what's not happening in the third season of Mighty Morphin. But the Shogun Zords, regardless, they were awesome. Giant robots that looked like they were carved out of stone. They have their own weapons. And again, what's actually interesting is they don't have. Here's the thing about Power Rangers is I think we need to go back to humanoid Zords more often than we're getting them. We got a little bit of them in Ninja now, but that's kind of an exception based on a number of factors. But just pure humanoid Zords with this basic combination: two arms, two legs, and the torso for the Megazord. That's just something that's kind of been lacking. We've always been getting all these different gimmicks, but just humanoid robots, I think, would be awesome within their own right. Um, but the White Shogun Zord by itself is interesting. It's just probably not as interesting as some of the other Shogun Zords. Blue is probably the most interesting because of what they were able to do with it, and the fact it was Billy's Zord. And I think it got a little bit more use within the Mighty Morphin footage than the others did. But where I'm going with this, let me kind of contrast that to the Gosei Jet. I honestly had forgotten that this was actually in Megaforce because if you will recall, from Ghost Sager, this was introduced within the movie. It was a movie exclusive Zord, and then they used it for one episode of the series. It was nothing really special. It wasn't a permanent part of their arsenal, from what I recall. I don't remember much of Ghost Sager because it was kind of a bland series anyway. But it was pretty cool. I really had no problem with it. It had an alternate Megazord combination, although it fell to the problem where it would replace the dragon as opposed to having its own other fleet of Zords, which I never really understood. I always thought you should make a second fleet as opposed to just this one Zord with these different heads on it. Regardless, again, I forgot it was in Megaforce until we had it on here, and it was another use of, oh no, we're in a gym, what are we going to do? Well, instead of doing something clever and using your mind, or you always have to think your way out of a problem, fight your way out of a problem, or talk your way out of a problem. That's what they say. When you're backed into a corner, you got to think your way out, fight your way out, or talk your way out. And the Megaforce Rangers, they don't do any of those things. When they have a problem, they are given a new Zord by Gosei. That is literally how they solve their problems. When the alien Mars shows up, they don't think their way, they don't fight their way, they don't talk their way. They're given new powers, and that's supposed to make everything better. Which is one of the major issues, or mega issues, with Megaforce and Super Megaforce. But the point I'm getting to through that little rant right there is that the Gosei Jet I completely forgot was in there, and the White Shogun Zord by itself is not that interesting as Zord if you compare, say, the Shogun Megazord or the fleet of Shogun Zords. So this matchup is kind of another weak matchup like the Warrior and the Mystic Dragon, where if you actually had Shogun Megazord, it's a better matchup because, well, Shogun Megazord would win. But the Gosei Jet, again, is anybody going to remember it? Is it going to be memorable? Is it going to be anything important? Because it just showed up, did its thing, and left. That is literally what it did in Megaforce, whereas at least the White Shogun Zord got to be around for the third season in Alien Rangers. So, and there was a whole plot point with the Shogun Zords, which is how they showed up again, as opposed... Because again, what happened with the Shogun Zords? Squat Babu and Finster find the Lost Zords, they capture Ninjor and the Falcon Zord to use the technology and power to power up the Zords, and then they kidnap Kimberly, the Pink Ranger, so that the other Rangers can be put into a sadistic choice. If you power our Zords and help us destroy the world, then we will go ahead and give you the Pink Ranger back. Again, it's tied well into the story, and I like it a lot. The Gosei Jet pops in, doesn't show up again. Hooray, you unlocked level 7 achievement. Here's the new Zord. You can't use it anymore because you used all your XP, or wherever the hell it is. So, long story short, too late. On that one, White Shogun Zord, definitely. Alright, next we have the Jungle Fury Rhino Steel Zord versus RPM's Road Attack Zord. Now, with the late Disney seasons right here, we're still subjected to that kind of like, here it is. It does serve something of a purpose within the storyline, but, it's not as egregious as Megaforce and Super Megaforce. Nevertheless, neither of these Zords really got a lot of screen time and a lot to do. Now, despite that, I will go ahead and say that the Rhino Steel Zord, it is freaking awesome. The Rhino Steel Zord, on its own. First of all, I love rhinos. I like Rhinox and Beast Wars. I loved Rocksteady on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I like the Rhino Zords in Wild Force, which I wish it was on this list. I just love Zords. I just love rhinos. Rhinos are freaking cool animals. I mean, they're awesome. Okay, that's what I'm going to go ahead and say about rhinos. So that off the bat makes this Zord cool in my mind. it has a rhino form, it has a giant robot form, which has a sword, it has a shield. It's also something that's a lot different than the other Zords in Jungle Fury that makes it stand out. Now, Geki Ranger, there's an entire mythology based around this Zord, how it was made. It's a lot cooler in Geki Ranger, but in Jungle Fury, it's not as interesting, and it's really not explained well. However, I am going to cut the Rhino Steel Zord some slack because I am familiar with Geki Ranger. And again, this is my opinion. I'm not based on any particular criteria. I am trying to base it on what's happening in Power Rangers, but when you lack some of that stuff, sometimes I have to go to the well of Sentai to pull these interesting facts. And again, this Zord in Geki Ranger was carved from stone and brought to life. I mean, not unlike Princess Diana, carved from clay, brought to life by the gods, which is exactly what happened in Geki Ranger. Something similar does happen in Jungle Fury, it's just not as well executed, so I'm going to go ahead and say that's pretty much similar, if not the same origin. But again, it's just a cool Zord. It is different from the others because the others are actually, spiritual projections. They're physical manifestations of their fighting energy and abilities, where this is a pure Zord through and through. And while I will say that the Ultra Zord forms is kind of funky in some way because it's not a true Ultra Zord, I just think that the coolness factor of this giant rhinoceros is just awesome. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and say about that. As far as the RPM attack Zord, again, completely lost the context from Go Andrew, because here's the difference. The thing about Geki Ranger and Jungle Fury is that there is enough there to assume something similar happened in the past of Jungle Fury that is similar to what happened in the past with Geki Ranger, because they don't outright state anything specifically. It is left up to interpretation. Whereas the Road Attack Zord in Go-Onger was basically a robot body that can be assumed by any of the engine buddies through the soul chips. Because we had one where Speedor was in the body, Bear RV was in the body. I think those were the only two that actually did it. But they had their avatars to be in there. It's like it's take over another machine form, and that was pretty cool. What is the Road Attack Zord in RPM? It's really nothing. It's just a mindless Zord who shows up and does stuff. I mean, the only thing you can really point out about it, that story-wise, is it was created by Scott and Gemma, which I really wish that was kind of a relationship thing going on. That would have been so awesome to have in RPM. But nevertheless, it's nothing. There is no story to it, honestly, and I can't pick the RPM Road Attack Zord over Rhino Steel Zord because of lacking everything. And again, it's one of those Zords that's not significant, and I don't think people really remember. Again, I had a hard time remembering it, but the only reason I did is because it's associated with my two favorite characters from RPM, oddly enough. So I'm going to go with the Rhino Steel Zord in this matchup. Alright, next, we have Megaforce's Dragon Megazord and Jungle Fury's Tiger Spirit Beast. Now, believe it or not, I actually went back and forth on this a lot, but honestly, both of these Zords are just so weak. It's really hard to go ahead and pick these two. I mean, it's like picking a Republican candidate. Anyway, the thing is with the Dragon Megazord, okay, it's awesome. It's a dragon, it breathes fire, it flies, and its feet serve as missiles. Okay, that's all I can really say about it, because that's all it is, really. The pilot's not very interesting. There's no interesting mythology about it. We don't know where it came from, how it was built. I don't even believe it was destroyed at any point. Nevertheless, that's all it is to the Dragon Megazord. The Jungle Fury Tiger, it's kind of the same. Again, it's a physical manifestation of Casey's energy, but beyond that, it's just a Tiger Zord. I mean, what about this Tiger is any better than, say, the White Tiger Zord from Mighty Morphin, or the Noble Tiger Zord from Wild Force? I mean, what makes this Tiger Zord better than the other Zords? Yes, it does have this, ethereal form, but that's not really part of the Zord. It becomes a Zord when it is physical, basically. So these Zords are just very underwhelming, and again, it's a lack of story or lack of anything interesting, but if I had to go ahead and pick between the two, and I have to, the Dragon Megazord, I think, is the one I'm going to go with, just because flies and shoots missiles and is a dragon. I mean, and we've had bear dragon zords, the Dragon Zord, the Red Dragon Thunder Zord. We've obviously had a lot better ones. Heck, Serpentera is a better dragon Zord than this one, but just going between two, I have to pick it. And first, and just off topic before we move on to the next one, does anybody else think that Megazord is just like one of the dumbest names they come up with Zords? I think RPM's had some dumb names, but Megazord, really? I don't know. It's crazy. It's stupid. Dragon Megazord wins this match. And then finally, in this first round, we have the Mighty Morphin Mastodon Dinozord and Dino Charge's T-Rex Dinozord, or Dino Charge Zord, whatever the official designation is. So let's kind of flip it right here. So Dino Charge T-Rex, I haven't known it long enough to get attached to it. Yes, I've been attached to the one in Kyryuger. I know how that is, but again, this is another thing where the Zords are completely different baseline backstory. We know that T-Rex, or Rexy, which I believe is the dumbest name you can give a T-Rex, and we've seen tons of bad names throughout the 90s when dinosaurs were at the height of their popularity, but Rexy's just horrible. It really has no personality like its Sentai counterpart, so it's not as interesting. It is what, again, I think that the best Tyrannosaurus Zord we've ever got in Power Rangers is the Mighty Morphin. I do think Dino Charge is second, and of course third would obviously be Dino Thunder. The three primary Tyrannosaurus Zords. So I mean, it's obviously better than Dino Thunder, but again, it's a work in progress. Maybe when we get down Supercharged, there'll be more interesting things about it. Mainly because we're going to get into the carnival form. We're going to get into the little dinosaur gun thing. We might get a repeat of the plot where Tyler's transformed into half man, half Tyrannosaurus, or the Tyrannosaurus Rexy's soul is in Tyler's body. We may get something like that where we can add to the substance of it as a character. But as a Zord by itself, it's not terribly interesting in my mind. Now, the Mastodon Dinozord, on the other hand, again, here's the nostalgia factor. It is a giant elephant Zord that rises out of the Arctic, heavily armored, and has liquid nitrogen as its weapon. Weaponized liquid nitrogen. That is freaking awesome. I mean, if Nolan ever did Mr. Freeze in a live-action Batman film, as opposed to the Schwarzenegger interpretation, then Nolan's Freeze, I always imagine, would go ahead and have a gun that shoots liquid nitrogen, because that's essentially what Freeze's weapon is. Yes, you get the more scientific take on the animated series and everything else, but the Mastodon pretty much has been shown that it is liquid nitrogen. Never outright stated, but that's pretty much it is. It's a white vapor smoke thing that freezes things, and I'm sure it's a liquid if we actually got down to the true science of it, but it's the Mastodon Dinozord. Again, you can call me, for loving nostalgia and all that kind of stuff, but again, fond memories. The Dino Charizard is relatively new. We haven't got to know it as well. But of all the awesome things about the Dinozords, I mean, the Mastodon's probably my favorite, second to Dragon Zord. But of the original five, definitely the Mastodon. I'm going to have to go with that. Sorry, guys, Mastodon in that. And I feel bad I have to apologize because you guys think I'm just going to pick all Mighty Morphin Zords because, that's what I grew up on. And I'm sure somebody who grew up on Ninja Storm at the same time that I was, I'm sure they would do stuff like that, but I'd like to think I have legitimate reasons. And again, a Tyrannosaurus Zord or a Mastodon Zord that shoots out liquid nitrogen. Come on, that one's pretty awesome, right? Okay. Okay, moving on to our next round, our second round of the bracket. We have Pyramidas versus Titanus. This one was one I did struggle with, not because, again, they're underwhelming like, the Dragon Megazord and Tiger Zord, but I really like both of them. So what is the tipping point here? Yes, both of them are integral to their plots. They had cool introductions. But you know what? The fact that Pyramidas can travel through space, can travel faster than light, and can turn into its own robot separate from, the other Zords. I mean, we never saw it fight on its own without the other Zords in it. I just think that gives a one-up over Titanus, because Titanus is cool, it's a dinosaur, but I will concede to the fact that we got a better Brachiosaurus dinosaur Zord later in the show, twice as a matter of fact, and you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to have to pick Pyramidas in this. For as much as I love and have all those fond memories, what it can do as far as Pyramidas is concerned, I think is what trumps it in this particular round. So, Pyramidas over Titanus. Next, we have the Phoenix Zord versus the Warrior Wheel. And again, here we go. Not much to the Warrior Wheel, even though it is pretty cool. But again, for what the Phoenix Zord stands for, what it can do with the other Zords, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Phoenix Zord in this matchup between them and the Warrior Wheel. I think it's as simple as that. The White Shogun Zord versus the Rhino Steel Zord. Now, this is where I actually kind of felt a little bad about myself because, again, I love the Shogun Swords. I like the third season. I love the visuals of Kaku Ranger, and I can't wait to actually start watching Kaku Ranger once I'm done with Jetman and a couple of other things. Nevertheless, it's just the White Shogun Zord by itself and not the Flea Shogun Zords or the Shogun Megazord. Because if this was Shogun Megazord, man, this conversation would be over in an instant. I would immediately put Shogun Megazord at the end of this particular bracket. But the Shogun Megazord is not there. It's just one component of something greater, which is really what a lot of these matches are, is they're one component of something much greater. And while I have put emphasis on that in other cases, I just don't see how the White Shogun Zord is better objectively than the Rhino Steel Zord here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Rhino Steel Zord, for again, being a giant rhinoceros and, you know, being its own Zord and all that other cool stuff, I'm going to have to go ahead and pick that over the White Shogun Zord. It kind of pains me to do that, but that is the truth of the matter. I have to go ahead and pick Rhino Steel Zord here. And then we have the Dragon Megazord versus the Mastodon Dinozord. I don't think I need to explain myself. Mastodon Dinozord in this matchup. Okay, our final four, as it is, we have Pyramidas versus the Phoenix Zord. Now, while Phoenix is unique in what it can do and what it represents as far as being different from the community of Zords, Pyramidas, again, I have to pick it. You know, space traveling Zords are kind of my weakness because, you know, here's something that Power Rangers in Space brought up. It was explored a little bit more in Lost Galaxy, but after Lost Galaxy kind of dropped off the map. And just let me say this real quick so I can better explain this to you guys, is that what they started doing in Zia was that they were world building. They were going out into the galaxy. Not only were we concerned on what was going on on Earth, we were concerned about what was going on in the M33 galaxy where Master Val is, and I hope that's right, is it the M33 galaxy? Because I know 100 of you are going to be against me if I got that wrong. But we're also concerned what's going on in Aquitar, what's going on Triforia, what's going on these other planets. That was one of the strengths of Zio, is that what was going on between the Zeo Rangers and the Machine Empire was just a small piece of a larger story. What Gasket was doing out in space was of significance. What the Alien Rangers were doing, what Trey was doing in relationship with Triforia, all that stuff was interesting. They abandoned a lot of that in Turbo, which was a big mistake in my opinion, and they got back to stuff like that in Power Rangers in Space by nature of the premise, of course. And then, of course, in Lost Galaxy, they continued that, where they got into space and they got this world building different worlds. Now, of course, yes, it was like Star Trek, and, you know, as y'all know, I love Star Trek, so anytime Power Rangers like that is great, but Power Rangers Zords in general don't have a space varying presence. Okay, so artificially, Pyramids was created as a space Zord. We have these space Zords, which again were artificially created as a space Zord. And what I mean by that is the American production had to change them to full-out space traveling vehicles that can go into deep space because of things that we'll talk about regarding that here in a little bit. But the whole point is that they were turned in space Zords. The Rangers never technically, and Sentai technically never had a actual fleet of space Zords, spaceships, if you will, where the major difference between them and Star Trek and Star Wars or Firefly or Babylon 5 or any show that's set in space is that they don't have a presence in space Zords, and that's something I really wish Power Rangers would get back to. I wish we would get. One of the rumors for the 40th Sentai was space bugs, and I just like that would be so awesome. Zords that can turn into spaceships and bugs. Then we can go explore space in Sentai and see what that's all about. Even SPD, Space Patrol Delta, they rarely go into space. I mean, and it's crazy. Okay, that's a different rant for another time. But because the Pyramid Zord, which is both magic and technology, which is what Zeo is a combination too, because it has something similar to a Zeo crystal within inside of it. I just think that all those things combined together make it better than the Phoenix Zord. So here I gotta go ahead and pick Pyramid over the Phoenix. Rhino Steel Zord versus Mastodon Dinosaur. Wow, was this a hard one for me to go ahead and pick? Uh, here's the thing. The Rhino Steel Zord is rather innocuous. It doesn't really do much. It's not particularly interesting into the overall plot. But the Mastodon Dinosaur, again, is one piece of a greater whole. But in this matchup, I have to give it to the Mastodon Dinosaur because we're in an age, and Jungle Fury was an age, where individual Zords were not as important, and still not as important as the individual Zords. Yes, in the Mighty Morphin era, they would often go straight into Megazord, and the individual Zords did not matter. Yet, when they went to the individual Zords, it was business all the time. It was always cool. It was always epic. There was always something happening. When they went against the Pine Octopus, that battle beat with all the Zords, that was awesome. When they went against the giant tarantula monster, that was awesome. When all the Zords were going against it. While it was a deviation from the norm, to be sure, and when we did see individual Zords, it was usually Tyrannosaurus with the Dragon Zord fighting. When we would go and see the Mastodon Dinosaur, it kicked ass whenever it actually was in there by itself. And I believe also, was it the episode with the giant or the Sphinx? I'm missing something here. The point I'm trying to get at here is that after really a lot after the Mighty Morphin era, individual Zords did not matter. Zeozord 1 does not matter in the whole compared to the Zeo Megazord, which it's a greater whole of. In Jungle Fury, the Jaguar Wild Spirit, whatever it is, does not really matter. It's the Megazord that matters. And the Round Steel Zord matters a little bit, but the Mastodon represents a time when individual Zords did matter. And the thing is, when I just tear myself apart with a lot of these decisions, because I think my decisions do tell you guys a lot about who I am, what my thought process is. While I don't want everything to be Mighty Morphin, I get that it had its flaws. It's not the best era of Power Rangers, objectively speaking, and we all can't love Mighty Morphin forever. It's like those who only love the original series and think everything after the original series is crap, or people who only like the original trilogy and hate the prequels and hate the idea of the sequel trilogy just because it was the first that comes out. Doesn't mean it's the best, even though we have the best memories for it. But when I look at this, I have to pick the Mastodon over the Round Steel Zord for what it represents and what it can do. Round Steel Zord, again, is not much within itself and doesn't mean much. When it goes into Megazord mode, it battles once against the monster by itself. The rest of the time, it's with the other Zords. So it's not so much individually as awesome as it is part of the bigger whole. Same with the Mastodon. But again, just looking at the individual Zords, the Mastodon, again, just this elephant that transforms into the arms and liquid nitrogen, all that stuff. So while it may be difficult for a lot of people to fully understand, again, for me to fully let you guys know, I have to pick the Mastodon in this matchup. So that's where we are. Meaning that our final matchup is between Paraminus and the Mastodon Dinosaur. Wow. Okay. So, I could go with nostalgic Mastodon, or I could go with equally nostalgic Paraminus, because let's be honest, guys, those first 4 years of Power Rangers kind of all flow together in a lot of ways, and frankly, the Turbo movie was ushering a new era of the Saban era, which again, is debatable with a lot of people, but, you know, if I had to, again, pick between the two, on which one I think is objectively better, a more interesting Zord, more fun, and just a personal preference. I'm gonna say Pyramidas. Yep, Pyramidas. So there you guys go. That is my North bracket. For every reason that I've stated up to this point, Pyramidas is the number one Zord for my North bracket. Coming next time, we will go ahead and talk about the final bracket, which is the Central bracket. Otherwise, I will leave you with this fun footage of Pyramidas.
Come the Rangers!